there's a lot of different kind of HVAC jargon terms for it. But if you take a step back, you got to move air in the house. There's a fan, and then you have to have something that makes the heat, and there's your fuel or your heat exchanger. One kind of funny thing with the gas furnaces is a lot of customers get a gas furnace because they want heat when the power goes out. That's great, but all blower motors are an electric motor, so you can't heat without electricity. And here I am, I'm kind of laughing as I'm talking because I'm just talking to the screen, so it's always interesting.
It's okay, Jordan. Humor doesn't translate very well over virtual, but I would just imagine that everybody is laughing along hysterically in their houses.
Cool. All right. Well, I feel like I'm doing a set at the Laugh Factory, and I'm just laughing. I'm just kidding. But anyways, we get the idea of how a furnace works. So in this situation, the gas furnace, the gas is making the energy. The fan is moving air over that to change the temperature of the air, get into your house. So when it's cold out, you have warm air moving around the house so you stay comfortable. So this is an electric element, and this isn't a furnace. And so this is kind of like looking into an old electric furnace, and you can see a couple things here. You can see that it's kind of old, it's kind of dusty, because when you have one box moving all the air in your house, you know, for a week, for a month, for a year, for 5 years, 10 years, some 15 years, it gets kind of dirty, right? Because you know, it's a vacuum, it's a negative pressure, so that's going to suck in dust, debris, and things like that. But the most important thing on this image is this is an electric furnace, and we know that because there's coils, or excuse me, there's elements. So there's elements the exact same way there's an electric element in your hairdryer, the exact same way there's an electric element in your toaster. They're the exact same way if you have an electric oven or an electric range, the way that heat is transferred, it's an element. It's basically a piece of metal that when you put electricity through it, the metal gets hot, and that's how you get the heat. So there's your source of heat. It's kind of, it works, and we call it 100% efficient. And so kind of based on, there's a lot of gas furnace folks in the call. So we talk about efficiency a lot. And so this is a good point to say, like, if you have a hairdryer and you're blowing a hairdryer on your hair, 100% of that heat generated by those elements is going on your hair to make it dry. If you have a natural gas furnace or a fireplace or anything like that, you're always going to have a little bit of leakage of heat at the top of the flue or your chimney. And so that's kind of like just to plant the seed as we get a little bit more into it of like how we measure efficiencies. It's all about how much heat do you get where you want it in the home out of whatever fuel you're using and the system. And so it'll make a little bit more sense as we go through. So there were some zonal heat customers on the call too. So this is say it with everyone, a baseboard. So this is a baseboard heater. This is electric. This makes heat the same way your electric furnace, and back to the toaster and the dryer. It's the same technology, or excuse me, it's the same efficiency. Because again, we have a piece of metal and we're putting electricity through it. That metal's heating up, and then we're doing different things with that energy, you know. And so a baseboard is going to radiate heat up. And you know, a one-off on baseboards is baseboards are normally under windows, because windows are a break in your thermal envelope. In regards to, you can have a nice insulated wall, and then a window can only reach a certain efficiency. And of course, there's different levels of efficiency when it comes to windows. There's good, better, best, and things like that. But it's never going to be as efficient as a wall. And so when you have a cold surface and you have warm air, the warm air hits a cold surface and it changes the density, and the density of that air wants to drop. And that's the sensation of, I have drafty windows, or, you know, there's air leaks around my windows. And there very well could be if it's an older house or it's not air sealed correctly, you can have air leaks. But the idea is that the air always wants to mix to find equilibrium, and it rarely will ever do that. That's why we have weather outside. But that baseboard is below your window to help prevent that air hitting a cold surface and dropping and swirling in the room. So it's kind of like a heater and a Band-Aid to prevent that cold air from infiltrating the whole room and then slowly changing the temperature. So that's a baseboard.
Jordan, this is Leah.
Yeah.
I do have a quick question about that. So the heat is not being sucked out of the window, correct? correct, under a baseboard? Because that's been one, I have to tell you, that's one of my husband's biggest pet peeves is why are the baseboards under the windows? Doesn't the heat just get sucked out of the window? And that's not the case, right?
It is the case. Well, the heat wants to go where the heat's not. Vice versa, the cold air wants to go where the cold air is not. It's, like when you look at Gulf of Mexico on like the hurricane chaser, right? It's all spinning, and that's because there's different temperatures and pressures and weather, but it's all trying to find itself to find equilibrium, and it won't do that. So you got a brawny towel, you could put a tip of the brawny towel in water, and that water is going to slowly go up. It's kind of like that sensation. But yeah, you're leaking energy outside, because if you have a 70-degree house and a nice big, big picture window like that might be, and it's 30 degrees outside, you can't create energy. You can only move energy with different things. And, we're talking about doing it with fuels, electricity, natural gas, wood, coal. But so some of the energy is leaking out, but when that energy leaks out, it takes the energy out of the air inside the house, and that air loses energy, and energy in air is heat. Energy is for the most part heat. Heat drop, or that energy gets, that air gets cooler, denser, heavier, drops. And it's not a sensation like that's going to start blowing, papers off tables and, winds going on. But if it happens slowly but surely, it's in the wintertime, we're cold, for 4 to 5, maybe 6 months. And so if it's happening regularly, that means your electric system is going to run more. And that means that over time you can get a higher bill, or you can use more energy to heat your box or your home, right? So, and windows are awesome, but if we build a box, we want to heat the box. The first thing we do is start cutting holes in the box with doors and windows and things like that. And then we can never make a perfectly airtight box. So that's kind of like,
good to know. Thank you.
There it is. You can be rambling there for a sec, but it's important. So that's kind of how it moves. But that's the reason why they're under windows. And what do people want to do with windows? They want to put a couch up to it or something like that. And that kind of prevents the efficiency of it. So those are basically the ways we heat, right? We got combustion, and then we got electric elements, and then we have different types of electric elements in the home. So combustion meaning fireplaces, meaning gas furnaces, propane furnaces, oil furnaces. There's the one-offs. There's always going to be the one-off. There's the pellet stove. There's the wood stove. There's the gas wall heater. And then with electricity, if you don't have a heat pump and you're heating with electricity, just imagine there's always a piece of metal heating up, and then you're trying to move air or do something with that hot metal to heat the house. I see my hands are going to disappear. So that leads us to heat pump technology. So we're making heat with fuels. We're making heat with electricity. We're making heat with natural gas or wood and things like that. But with heat pumps, we're doing something pretty cool. The heat pump is, I'm not doing it. It's essentially moving energy with a heating system, as opposed to making energy or making heat with a heating system. And by doing that, you increase the efficiency. And so all energy comes from the sun. So a heat pump is taking energy from one place and exchanging it to another place with refrigerant. And it's doing that with refrigerant, which is R410A. And that's like the best, most robust refrigerant that pretty much is standard all throughout the HVAC community. And I'm saying HVAC because it's a industry term, but it's basically heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, because it's all connected. And it's getting that energy from the sun. So you could go off and say heat pumps are a solar way of heating, because it's taking energy from the sun and it's putting it in the house. Vice versa, if you have a really hot house, it's going to take that energy out of the house and put it outside. And there's your refrigerator, right? So the inside of the box gets cold, and you don't want the inside of the box warm because your food will spoil. That's no good. So it exhausts that energy out to the back of the refrigerator. And so the easiest way to think about it, or the phenomenon, is kind of weird, but if you go, it'll say it's 90 degrees outside, that's hot, and you have a heat pump, and you put your hand over the heat pump outside when your heat pump is in air conditioning mode. It's taking energy from inside the house to make the inside of the house cooler, and it's exhausting that energy outside. And so now you put your hand over the heat pump, and you're getting hotter air than outside, which is really weird because you think a fan is going to cool air over your hand, especially when it's really hot. And in this situation, because it's exhausting energy in the form of heat, it's going to be hotter outside. That's kind of the phenomenon. It's like a mysterious magic way, but essentially the way it does it is there's compression. The gas is really robust, the refrigerant gas, and the refrigerant can always absorb energy in the air. And there's always energy in the air until we get to like absolute zero where, you know, everything just stops and that's really cold. But there's always energy in the air. So with heat pumps, you know, you can get to like 40 degrees outside. 40 degrees is cold to us, but to refrigerant, which is 410A, there's a ton of heat in the air. I think, you know, going off memory, there's energy in the air that refrigerant can take down to like negative 200 degrees or something like that. So that basically the gist there is it's really robust. So in this example, you know, on the screen here, we see that the system is taking energy outside, which is, you know, created by the sun, and then it's moving that energy inside. And the refrigerant is doing this over and over and over. And that's how you get the constant source of heat.
Jordan, we do have one question that came in.
Yeah.
Anna is curious. She missed something you might have said. Which systems use a refrigerant? And is that refrigerant some kind of a chemical? I think for some context, the individual Anna asking that question is really interested in replacing all of her gas furnace, getting rid of her gas appliances. So is interested to know which systems use a refrigerant, and is that refrigerant a chemical?
Yeah, really good question. It is a chemical. It's in a controlled vacuum sealed loop. So, and it's okay to change the slide because even in this situation, we see the loops, right? And so to answer that question to the best of my ability, refrigerant is a chemical, but it's not a combustion chemical. And so it's in a controlled environment, and it uses its chemical properties to absorb energy and release energy with the help of a compressor. And the compressor is the heat pump. So the refrigerant is a chemical. It's R410A for the most part, and it's with a heat pump. A standard electric furnace or a baseboard or a wall heater, there's chemicals that go into the actual construction of the device, but they don't use a chemical. Natural gas, you know, it's a fuel, it's a chemical, but it's a combustion chemical, and it's being combusted in a controlled thing, and then it has a flue to get the carbon monoxide out because that's no good in the house, and things like that. So hopefully that answers it a little bit.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah. So on that same note, you know, so there's a closed loop, right? So it's not, because refrigerant, it's expensive. You don't want it to leak into the atmosphere. And that's why it's so controlled in that closed loop. And you can use different means to get energy into that refrigerant, so you can put the energy where you want it, which is usually inside the home or a refrigerator or an ice room or things like that. So in this example, you know, you can just kind of take a step back and be like, where is there energy? There's energy in water, and water, like the Puget Sound, for the most part, is a really consistent temperature year round. It's really hard to change the temperature of the Puget Sound. So that's kind of like the idea behind an air source. Obviously ponds can freeze and things like that, but that's kind of like a hydro heat pump system. And it's all about where the heat pump is getting the energy from. So there's the water example. You wouldn't put a heat pump that's a water example in a pond that freezes, because then you'd be in trouble. There's geothermal. So depending on like where you are in the world and where your continent's at, and, you know, longitude and latitude and whatnot, you can go down, maybe for this sake, we'll say 2 feet. If you go down 2 feet in the Puget Sound, it's really the same temperature year round. And so you can find energy there. And that's a geothermal or a ground source heat. Or geothermal is a little bit different, but it's a ground source heat pump. They're really good. They're really cost effective. They're very expensive to install. We don't see those in our area. In our area, because we got that big body of water, and because even though we have some peak months of really, really cold weather and really, really hot weather, the bulk of our heating climate is pretty temperate. And so we incentivize, and, you know, I doubt there's a lot of HVAC contractors that are installing anything other than an air source heat pump. And that air source heat pump gets back to the idea that the air has energy in it, and there's a fan, and it moves volumes of air over a heat exchanger, and then the refrigerant, like we talked about, does its thing and absorbs energy. So those are the different types of heat pumps. So we're talking a lot about energy and heating and moving energy, moving heat, and like, okay, you're cooling something, that's not heating, but you're moving energy. And so if you take energy, it cools an area or whatever you're trying to do. And so there's a measurement that we use, and it's called a BTU, and it's basically, it's kind of like miles per gallon or horsepower, or whatever the analogy would be to how heating systems work, or how much your home would need to heat to maintain a certain temperature. So it's basically like it's a standard measurement factor for heat, how heat moves. And so here's the little analogy. I've also heard that if there was an elevator pitch, what is a BTU? Think of a BTU as the energy when you strike one match. That's a BTU, right? So I think if we were at the EnviroHouse, it gets really hot because it's a small room, and we're not doing that now, obviously, but it's a small room, and it gets hot because there's maybe 20, 25 people in there, and we're kind of a combustion appliance. We're breathing, maybe some politicians are more full of hot air than others. I don't know, but we're basically putting off roughly 500 BTUs. And so our body's losing heat, we're breathing heat, we're breathing water and things like that. So it's kind of all like one big system. But BTU, strike a match, is kind of like the rule of thumb. So this is a cost comparison. So here's the disclaimer. These numbers are based on, they're a calculation, obviously, they're not real world. But they're a calculation on like the same house, and the same house meaning that same house has the same, we call it a heat load or a heat calculation or a BTU requirement to heat that house. So how many BTUs does that house need in a given amount of time to maintain 70 degrees when it's 40 degrees outside? And it's always changing, right? And then when the wind blows, it changes. But if we were to like take a snapshot and say that that house needed 1 million BTUs, how much is it going to cost the person who pays the utility bills? And how much is it going to cost based on the type of heating system that they have? And so, and there's some assumptions in here, there's averages, but you could kind of get the picture that when it comes to fuels, heating oil, propane is pretty expensive, and those are combustion appliances. Electric furnaces are up there, and electric zonals up there because they're plateauing at their efficiency, because they always have that piece of metal that's heating up and putting heat in the house. And something I didn't talk about was that we'll touch on a little bit when it comes to ductwork is you have a furnace, which can be propane, gas, or electric, or anything like that. It could be a central heat pump. But when you have ductwork, you have air leaks, and that's important too. So there's air leakage built into these numbers. Rarely is there a ductwork system that is perfectly airtight and it's 100% efficient. Air's slick. It can always find its way out. It's always going to escape. But then when we go down the way there, pellet stoves aren't very expensive because pellets are a combustion appliance and they release a lot of heat when they combust. And then we have a natural gas furnace. When we talk about efficiencies of furnace, kind of like the 100%, and then when you put your hand at the top of a chimney and feel a little bit of heat coming out, that 92% natural gas furnace, that means 92% of the energy that gas furnace, just the box, is producing from the natural gas fuel, 92% of it is going to go into the ductwork and, fingers crossed, into the house. So that, AKA, if you go put your hand up top, there's loss. There's about an 8% loss. And you need to have that loss because that's your carbon monoxide and your gases that are associated with that combustion. And then kind of teeing up the reason why we have the webinar and the reason why Tacoma Power does conservation for heat pumps is heat pumps are the most efficient way to heat a home. And for this example, this certain house with 1 million BTUs with electricity. And that's just always think of, they're not making heat, they're moving energy with the heat pump to heat the home. Moving energy as opposed to making energy or combusting energy. So there's a big step there. And then on the flip side, So we kind of had that cascading thing of energy. This is the carbon comparison. So you think about, you hear climate change and things like that. There's carbon associated with everything we do. There's always going to be carbon. And that's essentially like the byproduct of humans changing the earth and making energy. But there's different levels to that. And so if we were to think about ourselves, each individual, as, you know, maybe the atmosphere or the world, and you were to hold a 6-pound dumbbell, you could do that. And, you know, you can handle it. But with some of those combustion fuels, there's a lot more carbon. And so can you hold a 6-pound dumbbell? Yes. Can you hold a 2,183 pound dumbbell? I don't think so. So that's kind of like the takeaway on Tacoma Power's power portfolio and hydro, and the impact of those types of generation, all the way at the dams or all the way at the power generation facilities, whether it's coal, natural gas, or anything like that. And then kind of how it affects, you know, this particular house, or, you know, when the numbers change a little bit, how it affects your home's heating system. So,
Jordan, we've got a question 2 slides back now on that comparison of the different system types.
yeah.
Perry's curious if that slide is specific to the Pacific Northwest. Is that the Tacoma Power Service area? I mean, I know that's a hypothetical home that hypothetically uses 1 million BTUs or requires 1 million BTUs, but is that for Tacoma Power Service area?
No. It's really close. So basically these numbers come from, I mean, the electricity rate, so the electric furnace, the electric zone, and the Energy Star heat pumps and the ductless heat pumps and things like that, those systems are built with our retail rate, which is what a residence would pay for 1 kilowatt hour. So our kilowatt hour, our rate is built into those. For the pellet stove and for the propane and the oil furnace and the natural gas, you know, we used averages. So we didn't choose the most expensive. We didn't choose the least expensive. We just found like, what would a person pay for a bag of pellets, or how much is a gallon of heating oil? And then, you know, we stick with the heating oil on the oil furnace on the most expensive one there. Basically, to break this down, we think about, okay, we have a gallon of heating oil. How many BTUs are in each gallon? How much does a gallon cost? And then you take 1 million BTUs divided by how many BTUs are in 1 gallon. And so there's some assumptions in there, but the idea is it's not, all these numbers and fuels aren't specific to Tacoma Power Service territory, but the electricity is what we know as electrical utility and our rates. And so that's kind of how it's factored out.
Great,
but
that makes sense.
I imagine this would be really true for our Puget Sound region.
Sure, got it, thank you.
Yeah, good question. I knew that was going to come up. I had someone in our power management department help me. Okay, so we're talking about heat pumps. So this is a traditional, this can be called a lot of things, you know, traditional heat pump, unitary heat pump, central heat pump. But the idea is that these are kind of the 2 parts of a central heat pump system. So you have your indoor unit, your indoor air handler, and it basically looks like a furnace. And so if we look at this furnace, we're seeing a couple of things. We're seeing that it's connected to ductwork, because furnaces move air in the house through ductwork, like we talked about. And there's white lines coming on the top of it. And so those are the refrigerant connections. And those 2 lines are how it connects with the unit on the left. And that is your outdoor unit. So with the heat pump, you always have to have something inside and something outside, because the goal of the heat pump is to either move energy from inside the house outside from your air conditioning, or it's to move energy outside to inside the house when you're heating your house in the winter. And so that's kind of like what they look like. And over the last maybe like 2 or 3, 4 years, the outdoor units have taken on different shapes, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But they all have an outdoor heat exchanger with a fan to move air and either exhaust energy or absorb energy outside. And this furnace looks like it's in a crawl space. Furnace, air handler, the combination of the 2, they're all over the place in the house. They could be ideally they're in a garage, because they're nice and simple to, you know, work on and get to. This looks like it's in a crawl space. They can be in an attic. They could be in a closet. in a hallway. They could be in your master closet. So wherever they're connected to the ductwork, they're in the home. And so that's your central heat pump. And that is the type of heat pump that would connect to your existing ductwork and replace an oil furnace, a gas furnace, an electric furnace, things like that. So that's how that system works. And we'll get into that a little bit more when we start seeing some breakdowns in the home. Here's another idea of the traditional unitary central heat pump, right? So it's taking cold air in the home, passing it over the heat exchanger, in this case is a coil, and there's a fan doing it, and it's putting warm energy in the home. And then if we follow those little lines to the left side, we got our outside fan unit. And so it's all connected. It's all closed loop there with the refrigerant. So there's also ductless mini splits. Same technology, same principles, same idea of how it's heating and cooling the home, except if you have baseboards or you have wall heaters, or if you maybe don't like ductwork, or your ductwork is not doing the job, or you had a goofy remodel before you bought your house and they did something goofy to the ductwork. Ductless heat pumps are awesome because they go on the wall and they take the air inside that room and they condition it, meaning they heat it or cool it, and they reintroduce it into that room. And again, with the heat pumps, they always got to connect to an outside unit to move that energy with whatever mode it's in, air conditioning or heating. And ductless heat pumps, as we saw on our slide with the fuel price comparison, and the the pounds of carbon, is the most efficient way to heat a house compared to any fuel. And I think it's compared to any fuel unless you have free wood from a tree you cut down. But they're like the tippy top of efficiency, and for a lot of reasons. And we'll touch a little bit more on that in a sec. Here's a side angle, and I didn't draw this. It's just a sketch, obviously. But this is, again, another way to grasp that concept of how the heat pump is heating the home. Taking in warm air in the room, putting it over the coil on that wall unit, on the wall above the gray chair there. It's absorbing that energy. And when you absorb energy with air, you cool the air, cooling the room, and then it's pumping that warm energy outside. So there's a lot of different types of mini split options. And so this is always a hot topic when we're doing it in the EnviroHouse. But the gist is there's different types of indoor units that you can kind of piece together to heat your home and how you want the system to like look in your home. So first thing is, I don't want that wall unit on my wall. Okay, well, manufacturers heard that and they got savvy and they created different different applications of how to get that in there. So if you look at your top line there, those are ceiling cassettes. So those are meant to go like between your ceiling joists, and they need a lot of space, and you have to frame, you have to cut sheetrock, you have to do a lot of stuff. But beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You don't have the wall unit on the wall. You have a recessed unit, and it looks like a big grate on top. And another thing to take away from this image, and we'll get a little bit onto it in a sec here, you can piece together stuff. So you can have, it's gonna sound goofy, a ducted ductless, where you have a unit up in the attic and you have little air supplies and little return. And you can have that system on the same system or outdoor compressor as a wall mounted unit. And it's hard to, I'm doing my best to explain it, but I would say if you go to YouTube and look at Daikin or Mitsubishi or other big manufacturers, they all market this because it's a whole home solution for the most part. And it's maximized comfort. And one thing to keep in mind, when you hear maximized comfort, there's always a little bit of cost that comes with that. So let's hit a quick survey again, kind of break the...
Sure. Before we jump into that, Jordan, I do have a couple of questions, and you may touch on this, just thinking of the ductless heat pumps. Gator's curious about, when it comes to cooling, how does it compare cost-wise to traditional AC unit? So I'm not sure if he means maybe the retail price or the operating price. So if you're just looking at
man, Lee, you're on it. Yeah. So it's more expensive than if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy a window air conditioning unit, home window shakers, right? It's more expensive, right? Because it's a more robust system and it's more efficient, meaning it's more efficient when it uses energy to cool the house. So more expensive up front, but less expensive to operate when it comes to electricity. And the size is completely different too. So, you know, you can get an AC unit for like a 250 square foot room, which is, you know, maybe a bedroom, but the ductless units are meant to heat volumes of space in your house, meaning like your living room, kitchen, dining area. That's a big space. So it's a bigger, more sophisticated system than something you'd buy at the store there.
Very cool. Okay, good to know. And I also just on maybe this is kind of a side note, but I didn't realize myself that you could have those. What do you call them? The cassettes, kind of the installation of the ductless heat pumps. I was always under the impression that ductless heat pumps had to come with that big, you know, white or whatever, you know, mounted thing on your wall, which is great for efficiency, and I'm glad it works. But I guess if aesthetics are part of your consideration and you don't want that big unit mounted to your wall, there are some other options. So that's good to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one more question from Anna before we jump into the next poll, and that's Anna was wondering, how are the units with ductless heat pumps, how are the units typically distributed around a house? Like, it probably depends on the square footage of your house, but I think what she's asking is like, how many do you need? One in each room? I mean, I know it gets specific to your house and what your setup is, but
yeah. No, it does. And it's good to ask yourself those questions before you call a contractor to come out and like look at your house. That way you got a foot in the door on the technology, and you got like a base, you know, knowledge. So in regards to that question, I think when we get into some like floor plan breakdowns, we'll see a little bit more of that and kind of how you can expect these types of systems to heat and cool your home. But rule of thumb is you don't necessarily need one wall mounted unit per room. But it really comes down to what you want as a customer and the price, because, you know, maximum coverage, maximum efficiency, AKA, you know, each room in your house getting conditioned with different types of indoor units, there's going to be a price associated with that, as opposed to, you know, do you want to just heat and cool your main living space that you're in the most, you know, year round when you're inside, and the biggest volume of air, because then you take a big chunk of your home's BTU requirement that we talked about earlier, and you can now control maybe 60 or 70% with the most efficient heating system. And then your house is working like a Prius, right? It's got multiple systems heating, and I think we'll see that in a little bit. Cool.
Very cool. Makes sense.
All
right, poll time.
Let's do it. Drum roll.
You're looking at efficiency question, right?
Yep, you got it.
So another pop quiz. Just how efficient is a heat pump? Let's put the poll up on the screen.
Cue the music, right? So we've been talking a lot about, you know, I've given some answers away, I guess, but we've been talking a lot about how efficient different systems are, right? Think back to the chimney with the hand over it when you have a fire. It's hot. That's a loss of efficiency, because the energy that you're making with the fuel you're using isn't going where you want it. So it's loss. And then you can think about our element in your dryer in your bathroom. When you're operating a dryer in a bathroom, hopefully you're not losing that heat directly outside immediately. So that dryer is 100% efficient, and that dryer is like your wall heater, your baseboard, things like that. So that's
all right. We'll give it maybe 10 or 15 more seconds here.
Let's do it.
Looks like we've got about 60-70% of people have responded. We'll give it 2 more, and I'll tee up another question for you, Jordan, while we're finishing this. And I think you may touch on this later. Jim wants to know if you could provide a price range for having ductless and/or duct heating pumps installed. Probably runs.
Yeah, a little bit. You know, we'll talk about the price of systems for the most part. So it's tough because. Let's say you're going to go buy a car, right? Well, a 4-door this is not a 4-door that, right? Back when Ford had Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, right? So Ford was this, Mercury, Lincoln. It's like that with heating systems. There's the good, better, best, fantastic, and then there's premier brands, and there's lesser brands that, you know, are just as good, but they don't have maybe all the bells and whistles. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it comes down to your contractor. So it all affects the price. And I would never quote a contractor's labor. So cool. We got the answers back. So 50%, 100. The answer is 250%. So Our furnace that's electric is quote unquote 100%. Our baseboard is 100%. And it's like, how do we know that they're 250%? It sounds like voodoo, or it sounds like a good selling point, right? Well, it's measured. So that BTU output of a system, that's our scale for measurement. And then there's different factors in which we measure a system. So to kind of rephrase that a little bit, because I can tell I jumbled over it. The BTU is how much heat, and when you size heating systems or cooling systems, you use what's called tonnage, and a ton is 12,000 BTUs. And that's like your sizing of a system. So when a contractor or when someone looks at a house, they're going to do measurements. They're going to, take into consideration everything, your wall insulation, your attic insulation, your windows, and everything like that. And they're going to size your heat pump via tonnage. So let's say it's a 3 ton. And then once you get a 3 ton, that piece of equipment, you're going to try and see what its efficiency is. And so heat pumps have basically, there's a few, but the 2 big ones that the market kind of agrees on is your HSPF and your SEER. And so most everyone talks SEER. SEER is that's like the industry norm. And SEER is how efficient that heat pump is to cool a home. And so, 14 SEER, 20 SEER, just think the higher the SEER, the better. And it just goes up from there, and then it plateaus at the most efficient. But around here, we're still a heating season, even though heat pumps can cool, and it's a great comfort measure. We still install heat pumps to heat the home during our, 5-6 winter months, depending. And to do that, we have a measurement called the heating season performance factor. And so to talk numbers, which is kind of goofy, I guess, but your baseboard, your electric wall heater, your electric furnace is about 3.4 in regards to the HSPF, your heating season performance factor. It's about 3.4, and that 3.4 and some numbers is 100% efficient. And there's a federal minimum standard that says every heat pump has to be 8.2. And so basically manufacturers can't produce in this country and sell them systems that are under 8.2. And so with our conservation programs, we want to push the mold even further. And we want to see 9.0 HSPF or higher. And that difference of, let's call it 9.2, we can call it 1 HSPF, it cranks the dial a little bit on efficiency, but then you have to think about how often that system is running during your 6-month, 9-month, depending where you're at, heating season, and then how hard it works to heat the home during that season. And so basically, 9.0 for our programs is the minimum, and our contractors know that. And, if you take a step back, that's about 2.5 times more efficient. And then when you get into like the top tier of efficiency, the best of the best, you get, like you can see 12, 13. And then, so that's measured in a lab, but it's still, that's like the efficiency behind those systems. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit. So heat pumps have been around for a long time. Basically, as soon as they had a refrigerator, they had a heat pump, and it was just doing one thing, it was cooling. But since then, there's a lot of upgrades to heat pumps, just like everything, right? The original phone was just a 2-way thing, and now we got a cell phone. Heat pumps have kind of followed along that. And so there's different compressor types. There's a single stage, there's a dual stage. Think of those as gears. And then there's variable speed. Variable speed is like, it can do a ton of different speeds, and it can, which matches whatever the house is calling for to heat. And then it's like, what's calling the heat? It's a thermostat, and we have smart thermostats. We have smart controls. There's better electric motors, and electric motors control a few things. They control how the compressor runs. They control how the fan runs inside your furnace, your air handler. They control how the fan runs on the outside unit. So just basically the gist is all the components are getting better in unison, but the same principle still holds true. It's taking energy with refrigerant from one place and putting it to where you want it, heating or cooling. They're quieter. So the change in outside units, construction and appearance is, based around a couple things. Big one is the decibel meter. Everyone's like, oh, a heat pump rattles all the time it goes. It's like, well, those are old and that one might need a service, but the new ones are insanely quiet. They're also maybe upright, and that helps with like urban environments. Think of Seattle, where the houses are kind of close to each other. Where would you put that compressor? And it can't be on a property line because that won't pass a mechanical permit. So there's all these things that manufacturers are changing to meet the needs of their contractors and then their customers at the very end. The mini split combinations we talked about, that's flexibility. If you don't have ductwork in a house, how would you get a heat pump? Now you can get mini split or ductless heat pumps. And then the sensors for outside are better. So instead of just a dial on a wall calling for heat, basically telling your furnace to heat the house, now it can connect to weather patterns. It can sense the outside temperature, the inside temperature. Some of them are so sophisticated, it can tell what room is a temperature compared to other rooms. And that's all great, but cost is associated with it. So those are the upgrades. Then we got, the little evolution of the system there, right? So this is the big part of why I'm here, is we have rebate opportunities for these systems. So again, we want to, as Tacoma Power, is in conservation, we want our service territory to be as efficient as possible. And in a home, the thing that heats your house, the system, is basically the biggest energy consumer in your house. And so that's where we take this opportunity to have a program to make the largest energy consumer in your house a heat pump, because in Tacoma Power's eyes, that's the most efficient way to heat. And then we can prove that, right, with our power or the cost of operation. Back to that slide with the cascading thing. Here's the application. Every utility has an application. Every utility has paperwork. It's part of the process. But the good thing is there's dollars associated with it. AKA we have rebates for different types of systems. And we have a really flexible heat pump program. I think we have one of the best ones out there, when I'm on calls, with regional other utilities and things like that. So, and that's a product of the coworkers and the managers that we work with at Tacoma Power. So here's where the dollars meet the road, and kind of back to that question on about how much do they cost, right? So this is a central heat pump that uses ductwork. There's some commissioning procedures that we require, and that's kind of like quality assurance and making sure that the system performs for how long it's expected to and as well as it's expected to. So we have a $1,000 rebate, or we have a $10,000 loan for central heat pumps. And think of central heat pumps as the thing that replaces your furnace and adds a heat pump so you get heating and cooling and uses your ductwork. So that's one kind of tier of the program. That question on how do these different combinations of heads, we're at 5 o'clock, by the way. I knew it was going to go a little long. It always does.
That's okay. We've got a little more time.
All right, cool. I'm hustling though. So that question on, where do I need an indoor, mini split or zonal head to heat my home? Well, one, it's all about your expectations. And that's a big one with contractors, right? Just make sure that they set the expectation for the system that they're proposing. So in this situation, if this was I guess we'll call it a 2-bedroom house with a little closet and things like that. This house is fully covered by a mini split heat pump system. So in our eyes, we call this a whole home solution. Again, meaning the ductless heat pump multiple head system, each room is getting its own source of conditioned air, whether it's heating or cooling. And so if, air can't go through a door, air can't go around a corner, go left, down 10 feet, and then go through another door. And so that leads to pocketing air. And so with this situation, each room has its own dedicated heating system. And so with this system, you should, for the most part, unless there's a really, really crazy, week or two, maybe a day where it's in the 20s or maybe teens, this system should be able to heat and cool that house in its entirety, even if you close doors. And so for that solution, we have a $1,000 rebate or a $10,000 loan. And, you can already piece together that these types of systems, $10,000 is about what they cost, but kind of like that good, better, best, fantastic example, you can always spend more money for the better, components of a system. So here's another example. So sorry, I'm jumping around slides a little bit. This one incorporates different types of indoor mini split systems. So we have our ceiling cassette, we have our wall mounted unit, and then in the middle we have, you know, basically like a little tiny mini split furnace. We call it ducted, ductless. And you know, that's how it can go into the home. So again, same floor plan. Now we just have wall mounted units. But again, we have a wall mounted unit in each main room of the home. The main living area, which is your connected volume of air, living room, kitchen, dining, and then in both bedrooms. And so again, this system is going to heat and cool the entire house, even if you close doors. You're going to get a lot of comfort out of it and a lot of performance out of it. So still in that question of, do I need one per room? You don't need one per room. You don't need one in general. I mean, I would say you need one, you got to get one, but you don't need one. But when you do get, say, one in your main living area, and then, you know, because of a lot of reasons, you know, cost is always out there. If you just want, you know, a lesser sized indoor head, maybe, you know, a lesser tonnage or a lesser BTU output head in your main living area or in your master, because you really want AC in the summer, and that's part of it, that's okay. We still have a $500 rebate or a $4,000 loan for that. But again, if we're looking at this, you know, home from the top, we have two main rooms of this home that don't have a source of conditioned air from this new heat pump system that's zonal, which is the ductless style. We have, you know, bedrooms 2 and 3. And so those doors could close. And so now we've pocketed a really good chunk of the volume of air, and there's no insanely efficient heat pump system to heat it. And so you can do two things. You can not heat it, which can lead to problems, or you'll still rely on your existing heating system. And that's why the rebate differences are you know, 500 and 1,000 and 4,000 and 10,000. And it all comes back to how much electrical savings we can claim as a department to meet that I-937 law. So and we can get into the weeds on that later. So let's say you want to do a simple one-to-one ductless, which is by and large the most efficient way ductless work. One indoor head, one set of refrigerant lines going to your one outdoor unit. And you always, with our program, we require it to be in the main living area. And ideally, you'd want that system to be in your main living area regardless, because your main living area is your biggest volume of air. And it's also the place you're in the most, right? So, you know, you want to be in the place that's heated the most efficiently and trying to stumble over the words a little bit, it has the best ability to heat the largest percent of your home. And that gets back to the bang for your buck. And so a one-to-one ductless, we require it to go in the main living area, and we have a $500 rebate or a $4,000 loan for that. So that's kind of like the tier there. And these numbers I know are tough, you know, if you're just kind of taking them in like, oh, what kind of system, what? You know, we're always here to help and explain it. This is a one-way communication just at the screen here. But, you know, we have a lot of staff that can help explain the differences and then talk about your own home. You know, if you have a 3-story house as opposed to a long rambler, there's a lot to take into consideration. So here's we call it our residential programs guide, you know, kind of cheat sheet, but this is something that our contractors have, and it's on our website and we use it. These are all the different types of residential rebates that we offer for conservation, for electric conservation. So, you know, the first two columns there, we see the heat pumps that we've been talking about for an hour and 5 minutes. We have a duct sealing rebate. So remember we talked about the ductwork leaks. If we seal up that ductwork and decrease the leakage, then the efficiency of that heating system goes up, right? Because the heat isn't going where we don't want the heat to go, or the cooling. Insulation and windows, you know, if it's cold outside, you put on a jacket, right? If it's hot outside, you take off the jacket. But basically, it's controlling the BTUs that your house is losing to outside. And so insulation is really good. Windows are really good. We have rebates for them. And, you know, we increase the efficiency of the home, AKA the home envelope. Smart thermostat, there's learning algorithms. They're smart, they're better controlled, they're more sophisticated, they control your heating system better, and there's energy savings associated with that. And there's some, you know, convenience stuff, you know, big time. And then heat pump water heaters. So heat pump water heaters are same idea, right? Your electric heating, your electric water heater uses an element, and so, you know, it's that's what's heating it, just like your furnace, just like your hair dryer. A heat pump water heater uses a compressor, just like these mini splits and you know, traditional heat pump systems that we've been talking about to heat the water. And we have a rebate for that. If you have questions on other products or the heat pumps, you know, definitely please reach out to us and we can maybe talk one-on-one. So you can reach out to us if you have questions and you want to talk to your utility, to the conservation department, or if you're really kicking tires on wanting to get a heat pump system or anything, windows, insulation, anything like that. We have a vetting process for contractors to work on our program. We call them our trade allies. They know they know what systems qualify. So back to that 8.2, 9.0 HSPF stuff. We have we have contractors that know those systems and they know what's eligible. So you don't. I mean, you can still ask them about all the specifications, of course, but you can trust them to, you know, meet that. And they can offer you the rebate on our behalf. But I got someone knocking on my door. That's always goofy. One sec.
Oh, the joys of working at home and
I know. I gave him this, and I feel like that's a kind of me. Thinks I'm a tough guy. Or something.
That's okay. I was on mute. You couldn't tell my neighbor was revving his dirt bike in the background, but you know.
A combustion appliance.
I know.
Cool. So, but the gist is we have contractors that they can process the rebate for you. They can help you fill out the paperwork, and they can answer a lot of the questions that are specific to your home too, because they want to make a sale. So they're going to come to your home and they're going to be like right there, you know, looking at like, this is my bedroom that's hot and this is my basement that's cold. You know, what can I do here? They can take that into consideration. And they can offer you the loan and things like that. And they can explain that along with us as well. So this is our conservation staff. Some have retired, some have moved on, but the majority are still there answering the phones and processing the applications and helping do presentations like this. So that's basically the gist of it. And I know that we went over time by about 10 minutes. And we're always here to answer questions.
That's okay. That was great, Jordan. In case attendees aren't keeping an eye on the chat, I did put a link to TPU's rebates for obviously the page that links to not just the ductless heat pumps, but the rebates that TPU has for all sorts of things. So I encourage you to check that out. Janda, if you are still here, I hope you're still here somewhere. There you are. We do have a little bit of time. If anybody else has any final questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. I don't see any right off the top of my, at first glance there. Oh, Jim does have a question. He's wondering if there's a good website he can research for different heat pumps. One that doesn't want to sell him one. He's tired of looking at it.
I could tell that Jim wants to do research, so that's good. But there's a directory called the AHRI, which is like the American Heating and Refrigeration Institute. So that's the entity that measures these systems to kind of give them their benchmark, right? So if I was a manufacturer, I'm going to say this is the most efficient, but they are a third party. They measure the performance of these systems. You got to know the model number of the system that you're looking for, which can be kind of hard, if you don't know. I mean, we're always here to help. So if you want to know how efficient a certain ductless heat pump is and you have the model number, we can talk about what those numbers mean and what you can expect from it. And then when you purchase a system, or even if you're getting a proposal of a system from a trade ally, a contractor in your house, you can always ask them for the AHRI certificate or, the model number, and you can Google the model number and we can help you make the comparison of different systems. So, so the AHRI, and you can always use Google too. I mean, you can Google how to compare heat pumps.
Fantastic. I did put a link in the chat to that AHRI resource, so Jim could check that out.
All right, cool.
I apologize, I might mispronounce the name. Malau asked if there was nothing on solar powered systems that we covered today. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Janda, does the EnviroHouse still offer a workshop on solar solutions?
We have at the EnviroHouse, I have invited the former presenters to do another one virtually, but I have not heard back from them. So I can provide information and some of the handouts if people are interested in solar. So if they want to email me, at the EnviroHouse, I can get back to them on that.
Great, Janda. And remind me, the EnviroHouse or email is EnviroHouse or what is the email?
ehouse@cityoftacoma.org.
Perfect. Great.
And if you have solar questions too, you can call our department, and you probably speak with me or someone else that helps process the actual systems that are installed. But also if you're just investigating.
Great. And is there rebates for solar products?
There's no rebates for solar, but you do have to go through the utility, because you have to get an electrical permit, and there's a production meter. So there's a process to it. There's no rebates through Tacoma Power.
Sure. Okay.
From Tacoma Power, but there is still a federal tax credit.
There's a federal tax credit, yeah.
And I think that the exemption from state sales tax is still in effect. I think that's still for another year, maybe.
Yeah. The tax stuff, I'll still clear because I'm not still.
Yeah.
I bet you the conservation team could tell you at TPU.
Yeah.
Couple more comments and then we'll wrap up. Molly was saying that the application, I assume she means the application for rebates, has a spot for those of us not heating with electric. Does that mean that we are eligible now for loan rebates for this? When she bought her home 4 years ago, her house was not due to the oil furnace, and she is a TPU customer.
Yes, if you're a Tacoma Power customer and you haven't participated in a HVAC or heating system rebate, you're eligible. So we lifted the requirement that it has to be an electrically heated home. So.
Okay, great. Good information to know. Perry just wants to give a reminder that you can combine your ductless heat pump system with your residential solar electric panel system. And it's a great way to work towards a net zero energy, net zero carbon home. So
it is, yeah. And that's back to that carbon, the pounds of carbon.
Exactly. I was going to say, Perry, it's almost like you work in resource conservation. Shout out to Perry Spring, one of our colleagues who works in resource conservation management for the city. But it's a great point, regardless of where you work. Thank you for that, Perry. Let me just double check. I don't think that I see any other comments or questions on there. I put the email address for the EnviroHouse in the chat. So if you have any final questions, you can email them. And of course, contact us or the TPU conservation team. If you're registered, we'll be sending a follow-up email here in the next couple of days. Keep an eye on your inboxes for that. It'll provide links and resources to everything and more you could know that Jordan covered, and link back to all sorts of TPU and EnviroHouse resources. And there will also be a video recording of this workshop available. So if you're
that is fantastic.
Are dying to see that, be able to share that as well. So thank you again. Be sure to check out cityoftacoma.org/workshops for upcoming EnviroHouse workshops. Janda, do you have any final closing words?
No, just thank you for being here, and do please let us know if you have ideas or suggestions for things that you want to know. We just completed how-to videos that are being edited on herbs drying and preserving, and we have more coming up on that. So just stay tuned, and we hope to see you back on site sometime soon.
Fantastic. Can't wait till we get back to the EnviroHouse, but in the meantime, we'll make do with what we can. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Janda, and thank you to everybody that's participating. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and end the workshop. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.